It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning in Meadow Lane. This was a quiet little neighborhood where nothing wild or crazy ever seemed to happen, at least, that's what everyone thought. The houses sat in neat rows, with green lawns and pretty flowers. Kids rode bikes down the street, and birds chirped in the trees. It was the kind of place where you'd expect everyone to get along. But not today. Today, something big was brewing, and it all started with a guy named Jake Tanner. Jake was new to Meadow Lane. He'd just moved into a small house with a white fence and a tiny porch. He was a regular guy, the kind who didn't make a fuss. He liked to keep things simple: mow his lawn, water his plants, and wave hello to anyone passing by. He wasn't loud or rude. He didn't throw parties or blast music. Jake just wanted to live his life and enjoy his new home. But someone didn't like that. Someone was watching him from the moment he unpacked his boxes. And that someone didn't like his welcome mat one bit. Her name was Karen Walsh. Around here, everyone called her the HOA Queen. HOA stands for Homeowners Association, a group that makes rules to keep the neighborhood perfect. Karen loved rules. She carried a clipboard everywhere, scribbling notes about anything she didn't like. She had a loud voice and a mean stare that could make even a tough dog run away. For years, she'd been the boss of Meadow Lane. If your grass grew too tall, Karen would know. If your trash can stayed out too long, Karen would knock on your door. She acted like the neighborhood was her own little kingdom, and she was the ruler who made sure everyone followed her orders. To Karen, Jake was trouble. Why? He was new. He didn't fit into her perfect picture of Meadow Lane. She didn't know him, and that made her suspicious. The very first day he moved in, she stood across the street, squinting at his house with her arms crossed. She didn't like his truck parked in the driveway. She didn't like the way he hung a wind chime on his porch. And most of all, she really didn't like his welcome mat. Now, let's talk about that mat. It wasn't fancy or expensive. It was just a plain old mat you put in front of your door. But it had a big, goofy smiley face on it, bright yellow with two black eyes and a wide grin. Jake thought it was funny. It made him smile every time he came home. To him, it was a cheerful little thing that said, "Hey, welcome to my house." But to Karen? Oh no. To Karen, that mat was a problem. A big, colorful, rule-breaking problem. That sunny Saturday morning, Karen decided she'd had enough. She marched across the street, her flip-flops slapping the pavement. Her clipboard was tucked under her arm, and her phone was ready in her hand. Jake was outside, sweeping his porch, when she stormed up to him. "Hey, you," she barked, pointing a finger right at him. Jake stopped sweeping and looked up, surprised. He didn't even know her name yet, but here she was, yelling at him like he'd done something awful. "That mat of yours, it's too colorful," Karen said, her voice loud enough for the whole street to hear. "It's against the rules. We don't allow stuff like that in Meadow Lane." Jake blinked. He looked down at his mat, then back at her. It's just a smiley face," he said, scratching his head. He didn't get it. How could a mat break rules? It wasn't loud or messy. It didn't hurt anyone. But Karen didn't care. She wasn't joking around. She whipped out her phone and started taking pictures of the mat. Snap, snap, snap. The camera clicked over and over. Jake stood there, broom in hand, watching her act like she'd caught him doing something sneaky. "I'm reporting this," she huffed, waving her phone in the air. "You can't just move in here and ignore the rules." Jake didn't say much. He just shrugged and went back to sweeping. But inside, he was starting to wonder what was this lady's deal. Here's the thing Karen didn't know, Jake wasn't just some random guy with a goofy mat. He was hiding something. Something big. Karen thought she was the smartest person on the block, but she had no clue who she was messing with. That little mat she hated so much. It wasn't just there to look cute. It was about to flip her whole world upside down. She thought she was in charge, but Jake had a secret that would make her wish she'd never picked up that phone. Imagine this for a second. You move into a new place, excited to start fresh. You put out a fun little mat to make it feel like home. And then bam, some lady you don't even know starts yelling at you about it. Sounds silly, right? That's what Jake thought too. But this wasn't just about a mat. This was the start of something way bigger, something that would leave everyone in Meadow Lane talking for weeks. So, here's a question for you, drop it in the comments below. What's the silliest thing a neighbor's ever complained about to you? Maybe they didn't like your dog barking or your Christmas lights blinking too much. Whatever it is, I bet it's not as wild as what's coming next in this story. Karen thought she was winning, but she was about to find out she'd picked the wrong guy to mess with. Before we keep going, let me say this: if you like stories where bossy people get what's coming to them, stick around. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because this tale is about to get super juicy. Picture Karen stomping around, thinking she's the queen, while Jake just smiles and waits. What's he waiting for? Oh, you'll see. It's going to be good. That Saturday morning, the sun kept shining, the birds kept singing, and Meadow Lane looked as peaceful as ever. But under the surface, something was bubbling up. Jake went back inside his house, leaving the mat right where it was. Karen stormed off, already planning her next move. She thought she had the upper hand. She thought Jake was just some new guy she could scare into following her rules. But she was wrong. So wrong. The truth was, Jake wasn't scared of her. He wasn't even mad. He was calm, too calm, maybe. Like he knew something she didn't. And that mat? It wasn't just a decoration. It was a clue. A tiny piece of a puzzle Karen didn't even know she was part of. She thought she was the one watching him, but maybe, just maybe, Jake was watching her too. What do you think? Does this sound like a neighborhood you'd want to live in? Or would you run the other way if you saw Karen coming? Either way, don't go anywhere. This story's just getting started, and the best part is still ahead. Karen's about to learn a lesson she'll never forget, and Jake's ready to show her who's really in charge. Keep watching, because this is one twisty ride you won't want to miss. Karen didn't stop with those pictures she took of Jake's mat. Oh no, she was just getting started. After yelling at him on Saturday, she marched back to her house across the street. Her flip-flops slapped the ground hard, and she was muttering under her breath the whole way. Standards, she grumbled. Outsiders like him don't belong here. She clutched her clipboard tight, like it was her best friend. Karen was mad, really mad, and she wasn't going to let this go. That goofy smiley face Matt had set her off, and now she was on a mission. Jake. He didn't think much of it at first. He just shrugged his shoulders and went back inside his little house. To him, Karen was just a loud lady who didn't like fun things. He figured she'd get tired of complaining and leave him alone. But he was wrong. Karen wasn't the type to give up. She was the HOA queen, after all, and she loved being in charge. So, come Monday morning, something showed up at Jake's door that made him stop and stare. It was a letter. A fancy one, too, with the words Meadow Lane Homeowners Association printed at the top. Jake opened it up and read it. Guess who signed it? Yep, Karen Walsh herself. The letter was short but bossy. Remove that mat or face a fine, it said in big, serious letters. Jake held the paper and chuckled. A fine? For a mat? That sounded ridiculous. Who cared about a little smiley face? He shook his head and tossed the letter on his table. This lady is nuts, he said to himself, laughing a little. But Karen wasn't joking. She meant business. That letter was just the start. From that day on, she turned into a super spy, always watching Jake, always waiting for him to mess up. Every time he stepped outside, there she was. She'd peek through her blinds, her eyes squinting like a hawk. Sometimes she'd hide behind her bushes, holding her clipboard and scribbling notes. He's got too many plants, she'd mutter, counting the flowers by his porch. His mailbox isn't even the right size, she'd huff, measuring it with a little ruler she carried around. Karen didn't keep quiet about it either. She started talking to the neighbors, spreading stories about Jake like he was some kind of troublemaker. That new guy's going to ruin Meadow Lane, she'd say, waving her hands in the air. He doesn't follow rules. First it's the mat, then who knows what he'll do next. Most people in the neighborhood didn't buy it. They'd roll their eyes and whisper, "Oh, that's just Karen being Karen." They'd lived with her long enough to know she loved making a big deal out of nothing. But a few folks listened. They started looking at Jake funny when he walked by. Some stopped waving back. One lady even crossed the street so she wouldn't have to talk to him. Jake noticed all of this, but he didn't let it bug him. He stayed cool as a cucumber. When Karen glared at him, he didn't glare back. When neighbors gave him the cold shoulder, he didn't get mad. He just smiled and waved, same as always. If you saw him, you'd think nothing was wrong. He'd mow his lawn, water his plants, and sit on his porch like it was no big deal. But here's the thing, he wasn't smiling just to be nice. He was smiling because he knew something Karen didn't. Something big. Something that was going to turn this whole mess upside down. See, the tension was growing in Meadow Lane, and it wasn't just about a silly Matt anymore. Karen thought she was winning. She thought she could boss Jake around and scare him into following her rules. Every day, she'd watch him a little closer, write a little more on her clipboard, and tell a few more neighbors he was bad news. She was sure she had him figured out, just some new guy who didn't know how things worked around here. But she was so busy judging him that she didn't see what was really going on. A storm was coming her way, and she didn't have a clue. Jake wasn't scared of her letters or her spying. He didn't care that some neighbors were acting weird. He kept that mat right where it was, smiley face and all. Why? Because he wasn't just a regular guy like Karen thought. He had a secret that made all her complaining look silly. Every time she peeked at him, every time she wrote a note, she was digging herself into a bigger hole. And Jake? He was happy to let her keep digging. Think about it. Karen was running around like she owned the place, telling everyone what to do. She thought she was so smart, catching Jake with his wrong mat and too many plants. But Jake wasn't worried. He'd nod at her when she stared, like he was saying, "Go ahead, keep watching." It was almost like he wanted her to keep going. Why would he do that? What was he hiding? That's the fun part, you'll find out soon. The air in Meadow Lane was starting to feel heavy, like before a big rain. Karen kept pushing, and Jake kept waiting. The neighbors who didn't like him stayed quiet, but the ones who didn't care about Karen's rules started to wonder. What's her problem with that guy, they'd ask each other. It's just a mat. They didn't know it yet, but this wasn't about the mat anymore. It was about Karen and Jake, and a showdown that was getting closer every day. Karen thought she was building a case against him. She'd sit in her house, writing lists of everything Jake did wrong. Too many plants, check. Funny mat, check. Mailbox not the right size, check. She was sure she'd get him in trouble. Maybe even get him kicked out of Meadow Lane. She smiled to herself, thinking she was the queen of the neighborhood, keeping everything perfect. But she didn't see the trap she was walking into. Jake wasn't breaking rules for no reason. He was setting her up, and she was too busy being nosy to notice. So, the tension kept building. Karen spied. Jake smiled. Neighbors whispered. And that little Matt sat there on the porch, bright and happy, like it knew something too. Karen thought she was in control, but she wasn't. Not even close. Something big was coming, something that would make her wish she'd left Jake alone. What do you think Jake's hiding? Stick around, because this story's about to get wild. Days turned into weeks in Meadow Lane, and Karen didn't slow down one bit. She got braver and bolder every day. She was like a detective in a movie, always looking for something to catch Jake doing wrong. She'd peek out her window, scribble on her clipboard, and mutter about how he was ruining the neighborhood. That silly smiley face Matt was still on his porch, and it drove her nuts. But now, she wasn't just mad about the Matt. She was mad about everything Jake did. And one afternoon, she finally flipped out. It was a warm day, and Jake was outside watering his flowers. He had a little hose in his hand, spraying the daisies by his steps. The sun was shining, and he was humming a tune, happy as could be. But then Karen checked her watch. It was 5 minutes past the HOA's approved watering time. The rule said you could only water your yard between 7 o'clock and 7:30 in the evening. Jake was at 7:35. 5 tiny minutes late. To most people, that's no big deal. But to Karen? It was like he'd broken every law in the world. She burst out of her house like a tornado. "That's it," she shrieked, her voice so loud the birds stopped chirping. "I've had enough of you." She stomped across the street, her flip-flops smacking the ground, and pointed right at Jake. "You're watering your flowers too late. It's against the rules." Jake looked up from his hose, water dripping on his shoes. He blinked at her, calm as ever. "It's just 5 minutes, he said, nice and easy. But Karen didn't care. She waved her phone in the air like it was a sword. "I'm calling the cops," she yelled. Jake didn't even flinch. He just nodded and said, "Go ahead." His voice was so quiet, so steady, it was almost like he wanted her to call. Karen's eyes got wide, like she couldn't believe he wasn't scared. She thought for sure he'd beg her to stop, but nope. Jake turned off the hose, leaned against his porch railing, and watched her. He had this tiny smirk on his face, a little smile that said he wasn't worried at all. Karen didn't waste a second. She dialed 911 right there in front of him. "Hello? Yes, I need help," she said into the phone, her voice shaking with drama. "There's a man here breaking every rule in the book. He's got an illegal mat, and now he's watering his yard like a criminal." She paced back and forth, yelling so loud the neighbors peeked out their windows. "You need to send someone right now." The person on the other end, the dispatcher, let out a big sigh. You could hear it through the phone, like they were tired of Karen's calls. But they said they'd send someone anyway. Karen hung up and crossed her arms, staring at Jake with a smug look. "You're in trouble now," she said, nodding like she'd just won a prize. Jake didn't say a word. He just stood there, leaning on his porch, that tiny smirk still on his lips. He looked so relaxed, like he was waiting for a friend to show up, not the police. Karen thought she had him trapped. She thought the cops would roll up, see his mat and his late watering, and take her side. Oh, how wrong she was. Here's where things start to get really good. While Karen stood there, gloating and waiting, a police car turned onto Meadow Lane. Its lights weren't flashing, and it didn't make a sound, just rolled up nice and slow. Karen's face lit up. "See," she said to Jake, pointing at the car. "I told you. They're here for you." She smirked, thinking she'd finally beaten him. She pictured the cops telling Jake to take down his mat and follow her rules. In her head, she was the hero of the neighborhood, saving Meadow Lane from the troublemaker. But then something funny happened. The police car stopped right in front of her house, not Jake's. Two officers stepped out, wearing blue uniforms and serious faces. They didn't even look at Jake or his mat. Instead, they started walking straight toward Karen's front door. Her smirk disappeared fast. Her mouth dropped open, and she froze like a statue. "Wait, what's going on?" she stammered, her voice all shaky now. She looked at the cops, then at Jake, then back at the cops. "You're supposed to be here for him," she said, pointing at Jake. The officers didn't answer her. They just kept walking toward her house, calm and steady. Jake. He stayed where he was, leaning on his porch with that little smirk still there. He didn't say a peep, but his eyes followed the cops like he knew something big was about to happen. Karen's face turned red. She dropped her phone in the grass and started waving her hands. "No, no, no. You've got it wrong," she shouted. "He's the one breaking rules. Look at his mat. Look at his flowers." But the cops didn't care about the mat or the flowers. They had bigger fish to fry, and those fish were all about Karen. What was going on? Why were the police at her house? Karen didn't know it yet, but her perfect little world was about to fall apart. See, Jake wasn't just some guy with a goofy mat and a hose. He'd been watching her too all this time. While she was busy spying on him, writing notes, and calling the cops, Jake was collecting his own secrets. And now, those secrets were coming out. The neighbors started poking their heads out again, whispering to each other. "What's Karen done now?" one lady asked. "Why are the cops at her place?" said a guy down Frankett Street. "They were curious, just like you probably are right now." Karen thought she was so smart, catching Jake watering his flowers 5 minutes late. But she didn't see the real picture. Something was up, something she never expected. Jake's smirk grew just a tiny bit bigger as he watched the cops knock on Karen's door. He didn't move. He didn't cheer or laugh. He just waited, like he'd known this moment was coming all along. Karen, though. She was a mess. She kept yelling at the cops, telling them they'd made a mistake. But they weren't listening. They had papers in their hands, and they looked serious, like they weren't there to talk about mats or flowers. What was Karen hiding? Why were the police after her instead of Jake? Hang tight, because you're about to find out. This story's getting wilder by the minute, and the best part is still ahead. Jake's little smirk and calm attitude were starting to make sense. He wasn't scared of Karen's rules or her calls to 911. He had a plan and it was working perfectly. Stick around, because the next twist is going to blow your mind. The police car sat quietly in front of Karen's house, and the two officers stepped up to her door. They knocked 3 loud thumps that echoed down the street. Karen's face turned as white as a ghost. Her eyes got big, and her mouth opened, but no words came out at first. She just stood there, frozen, like she couldn't believe what was happening. "Ma'am, we need to talk," one of the officers said. His voice was calm but firm. He held up a stack of papers in his hand, waving them a little so she could see. Karen blinked fast, like she was trying to wake up from a bad dream. Across the street, Jake watched it all. He leaned against his porch railing, arms crossed over his chest. That tiny smirk was still on his face, the same one he'd had when Karen called the cops. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. See, Jake wasn't just some regular guy who liked goofy mats. Oh no. He was something way bigger. Jake was an undercover investigator. That means he was a secret helper, hired by the city to check out problems in neighborhoods like Meadow Lane. And guess what? He'd been digging into complaints about the HOA, complaints about Karen. Karen didn't know any of this. For years, she'd been acting like the queen of Meadow Lane. She'd collect money from everyone, dues, she called them. The neighbors paid her every month, thinking it was for fixing things like cracked sidewalks or painting fences. But here's the shocker, those repairs never happened. The sidewalks stayed broken. The fences stayed old. So where did all that money go? Right into Karen's pocket. She'd been scamming everyone, taking their cash and keeping it for herself. She thought she was so sneaky, but Jake was sneakier. Now, let's talk about that welcome mat, the one with the big, goofy smiley face that Karen hated so much. It wasn't just a mat. Nope. Hidden inside it was a tiny camera. Jake had put it there on purpose, like a trap. He knew Karen couldn't stand the mat, and he figured she'd try something dumb. And boy, did she. That little camera caught her snooping around his porch late one night. The video showed her creeping up, looking left and right to make sure no one saw her. She even tried to rip the mat up with her hands, tugging and pulling like a wild animal. But she didn't know the camera was rolling the whole time, recording every move she made. That wasn't all Jake had, though. The cops didn't just come because of the mat video. They had way more proof, big stuff like bank records and emails. Those papers in the officer's hand? They showed all the money Karen had taken, all the lies she'd told. Every time she said, "Oh, we'll fix that soon," and then bought herself a new purse instead, it was written down somewhere. Jake had found it all. He'd been quiet, watching and waiting, while Karen thought she was the smartest person around. But now her little kingdom was falling apart, and she didn't even see it coming. "Karen Walsh," the officer said, stepping closer, "you're under arrest for fraud." Fraud means stealing money by tricking people, and Karen had done a lot of that. The other officer pulled out handcuffs, shiny silver ones that clicked when they snapped shut. They grabbed her wrists and put the cuffs on tight. Karen's face twisted up like she'd eaten a sour lemon. "This is outrageous," she shouted, her voice high and squeaky. "You can't arrest me. It's that Matt's fault. It's his fault." She pointed at Jake, shaking her finger like she could make it all his problem. But the cops didn't care about her yelling. They'd heard enough. They started walking her toward the police car, one on each side so she couldn't run. Karen kept talking, fast and loud. "I'm the HOA queen. I make the rules. You've got the wrong person," she cried. Her flip-flops dragged on the ground as she tried to pull away, but the officers were stronger. They opened the car door and helped her inside, shutting it with a loud thud. The neighbors couldn't believe their eyes. They'd been watching this whole time, peeking out from behind curtains and standing on their porches. Jaws dropped. Eyes got wide. "Karen's getting arrested," one lady whispered to her husband. "For real?" a kid on a bike asked his friend. Everyone was stunned. They'd known Karen was bossy, but this was huge. And there was Jake, still standing on his porch, cool as ever. He uncrossed his arms and gave a little wave to the neighbors like a friendly hi after all the chaos. That tiny smirk never left his face. Who'd have thought the quiet new guy, the one with the funny mat, was the one pulling the strings. Not Karen, that's for sure. She'd been so busy spying on him, yelling about rules, and calling the cops that she didn't notice he was the real hero here. Let's rewind a bit. When Karen called 911 about Jake watering his flowers, she thought she'd won. She thought the police would show up, tell him off, and make him take down that mat. But instead, they came for her. Why? Because Jake had been working behind the scenes the whole time. He moved into Meadow Lane on purpose, not just to live there, but to catch Karen. All those weeks she spent watching him, writing notes, and complaining. He was watching her right back, collecting proof to show what she'd done. That mat she hated? It was like a secret weapon. The camera inside caught her acting sneaky, but it was more than that. It was a sign that Jake wasn't scared of her. He put it there knowing she'd flip out, knowing she'd try something. And when she did, he had her on tape. Add that to the bank stuff and the emails, and boom, Karen's game was over. The police car's engine started up, a low rumble that broke the silence. Karen sat in the back, still yelling, but the windows were up, so it was just muffled noise now. The neighbors kept staring, some shaking their heads, some whispering to each other. They'd paid her money for years, trusting her to take care of Meadow Lane. Now they knew the truth, she'd been taking advantage of them all along. Jake didn't cheer or jump around. He didn't need to. He'd done his job, and that was enough. He turned and walked back to his door, stepping over that smiley face mat like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal. That little mat had helped bring down the HOA queen. Who'd have guessed? This was the moment everything changed in Meadow Lane. Karen thought she was in charge, but Jake showed her she wasn't. The quiet guy with the funny mat turned out to be the one with all the power. And Karen? She was about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong person. Stick around, because this story's not over yet. Karen's time as the boss of Meadow Lane was done. Finished. Over. The cops took her away in their car, and she couldn't yell her way out of it this time. Her hands were in those shiny handcuffs, and her loud voice didn't scare anyone anymore. She wasn't the HOA queen now, just a lady in big trouble. The police drove off with her, and the neighborhood watched as the car disappeared around the corner. That was it. Karen's reign was kaput. Things didn't just stop there, though. The HOA the group Karen ran got a huge shakeup. People started talking, and it turned out tons of folks had problems with her. They'd been quiet before, but not anymore. She took our money, one man said. She fined me for nothing, a lady added. Neighbors told stories about missing cash dues they'd paid for repairs that never happened. They talked about fake fines, too, like when Karen charged someone for a mailbox being too blue. It was crazy. And Jake? His evidence, the mat video, the bank papers, the emails proved it all. He blew the whole thing wide open, like popping a big balloon full of secrets. The neighbors who'd been mean to Jake changed fast. Before, some of them wouldn't even look at him. They'd cross the street or turn away when he waved, all because Karen said he was trouble. But now? Oh, they were all smiles. Hey, Jake, want to come over for coffee? One lady asked, grinning like they'd been pals forever. Thanks for getting rid of her, a guy shouted from his porch. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be his friend. They saw he wasn't a rule breaker, he was the guy who saved Meadow Lane from Karen's tricks. Jake didn't make a big deal out of it, though. He didn't brag or show off. He didn't say, "I told you so." Nope. He stayed the same quiet, cool guy he'd always been. After the cops left, he walked out to his porch and put that smiley face mat right back where it belonged. It sat there, bright yellow and happy, like nothing had happened. Then he went about his day mowing the lawn, watering his flowers, just living his life. He didn't need a parade or a trophy. He'd done what he came to do, and that was enough for him. Meadow Lane felt different now. It was free again. No more Karen peeking through blinds or yelling about rules. No more fake fines or missing money. The nosiest, bossiest neighbor of all was gone, and everyone could breathe a little easier. Justice had come to town, and it felt awesome. It wasn't just about catching Karen, it was payback, too. She'd picked on Jake, spied on him, and tried to get him in trouble. But in the end, she was the one who got caught. And that felt good. The neighborhood was buzzing with chatter. Kids rode their bikes again, laughing instead of whispering. Grown UPS waved to each other, happy to have their money and their peace back. And Jake's mat? It stayed right there, smiling at everyone who walked by, a little reminder that sometimes the quiet guy wins. Justice was served, hot and fresh, with a big side of HA, take that, Karen. Meadow Lane was finally free, and it was all thanks to Jake. Okay, let's think about what happened here. Sometimes, the people who yell the loudest like Karen have the biggest secrets. She was always shouting, pointing fingers, and telling everyone what to do. She acted like she was perfect, like she knew everything. But guess what? She was hiding something bad. All that noise she made? It was just a way to cover up her own mess. She thought she could boss the whole neighborhood around forever, but then Jake came along. Quiet, calm Jake with his goofy mat and his little smirk showed her she was wrong. Jake didn't need to yell or fight. He didn't stomp around or call people names. He just stayed cool and smart, and that's what beat her. It's like a superpower, quiet strength. Karen thought she was the strongest because she was loud, but Jake proved that being quiet and clever can win every time. He didn't let her scare him. He didn't run away. He stood his ground, and in the end, he turned her whole game upside down. That's pretty cool, right? So here's something to think about: next time someone's pointing fingers and making a big fuss, maybe take a closer look. Maybe they're not as perfect as they want you to think. Maybe they're the real troublemaker, just like Karen was. People who act all high and mighty sometimes have stuff to hide. But people like Jake? The ones who don't make a lot of noise? They might be the ones who fix things and make everything better. What about you? Have you ever met a Karen, a loud, bossy person who thought they could push everyone around? Did they ever get what was coming to them, like Karen did here? I bet you've got a story. Drop it in the comments below, I'd love to hear it. Maybe your neighbor complained about something silly, like your dog barking once, or maybe someone tried to boss you around at school. Tell me all about it. And if you like this twisty, fun tale about Jake and Karen, give it a big thumbs up. It's awesome to know you enjoyed it. This story's done, but don't worry, there's more where this came from. I've got lots of tales to tell, full of surprises and cool endings just like this one. Meadow Lane is peaceful now, thanks to Jake, but who knows what's happening in other neighborhoods. Maybe there's another quiet hero out there, ready to take down another loud troublemaker. Stick around, because I'll be back with more stories to share. Trust me, you won't want to miss them. So, what's the big lesson here? Don't judge people too fast. The loudest voice isn't always the right one, and the quietest person might just be the strongest. Jake showed us that. He took down Karen's little kingdom with a smile and a mat. How awesome is that? Keep being you, stay strong in your own way, and maybe you'll be the hero of your own story someday. See you next time.